Welcome to episode 13 of the State Line Fast Break podcast. I'm your host, Kasey Boone. Alongside me, as always, the great Josh Miller.
Here we go with the off-season preview episode of this podcast. We're going to talk coaching changes and a bunch of off-season trade rumors and news around this upcoming off-season. Let's get right into it.
Before we get started, we need to hold a 5-second moment of silence. That is right. Gregg Popovich has stepped down as the San Antonio Spurs head coach. He will remain as the president of basketball operations, a role that he has had for many years now. But this is a significant change, not only for the San Antonio Spurs, but for the NBA as a whole. We have seen kind of the outcast. You've had players like Draymond Green, Steve Kerr, Ime Udoka, even Kawhi Leonard talking about his former head coach and a well-respected member of the NBA family, Gregg Popovich, who has decided he will no longer be on the sidelines for games. Obviously, we saw the stroke that he had suffered just a few games into the year this year, and the recent health scare has led him to believe that he is no longer suited to be on the sidelines for the betterment of not only himself but the organization. The Spurs have been very complimentary of Popovich and talked about the health that he is in, saying he's in very good shape, but they will be moving forward now, hiring Mitch Johnson, who is the interim head coach, as the permanent head coach in the wake of Popovich stepping down. As a lifelong Spurs fan, it is a very heartbreaking situation. This is somebody that has been there for my entire life, the head coach of the Spurs, watching them for now 20-plus years. It is sad to see him go. He has given me a lot of memories. And it's been a very interesting year for the Spurs from many different standpoints. You obviously saw the Popovich stuff early, the blood clots with Wemby, trading for De'Aaron Fox. They never make trades like that. So it really is a new era of Spurs basketball. It's going to be a very interesting offseason. Obviously, they got 2 lottery picks where we can kind of move. You've got what we're going to talk about today. There's a lot of trade bait out there. We've got several key star players that we're going to get into in just a few minutes, but Popovich took the Spurs over in '96 after he was the GM for several years, fired the coach mid-year, decided to take over, has not looked back since. 29 years as the head coach, including 20 straight years in the middle of that where he had 50-win seasons, more wins than any coach in the history of the game, 5 NBA championships. He is a legend, and he is well respected for what he has done on the court, but as we've seen, like Draymond Green and many other guys talk about, even some of the Spurs coming out on social media, DeJounte Murray, David Robinson, obviously we saw what Wemby posted, and Castle and all those guys. Very well respected as a human being, and what he does for his players off the court has a ton of respect within the league. Really transcended the league. I mean, he was a big part of the late 90s, early 2000s, and the early 2010s. He started a lot of the player management stuff, so he's been very revolutionary in kind of the way that he's operated. And so it's a big change for the league. It's a big change for the Spurs. As a Spurs fan, I'm excited for the future. We'll see what Mitch Johnson can hold, but I look forward to seeing the role that Popovich is going to have, and I'm glad that he is getting his flowers after all these years.
Yeah, he deserves his flowers. You know, there's a very strong argument for him being the best coach in the history of basketball, and definitely in our lifetime, by far, universally seen as the best coach in the league for almost every year he coached. And then, you know, towards the end, his rosters were pretty bad. But, I mean, 20 years of 50-win seasons is remarkable. Obviously, the 5 championships, the amount of Hall of Famers that he can be credited with helping get their way there. I mean, just to name a few of the obvious ones, Tim Duncan being the best one they had, but you got so much production out of Tony Parker. Obviously, Ginobili fell very late in the second round. He's, you know, he got the most out of him. There's so many guys that role players where he could get the most out of as opposed to any other coach in the league. And so many years, especially going back to a lot of those 2010 playoff runs that I started watching basketball. I mean, we had some run-ins, Grizzlies, Spurs, and those years, and you just knew what you were getting with the Spurs, whether if they had whoever was on the court, they were going to play great fundamental basketball. They were always the best ball movement team in the league, and that's because of him. I mean, this is the system he implemented, and he adapted to his players almost as good as any coach in the history of the league. Obviously, the defenses that they had, smart team defenders, they always had. Mainly the best one in Tim Duncan. And, you know, maybe some younger NBA fans won't be able to appreciate him as much. I mean, he was winning championships before we were even born. And then, you know, anyways, but he gets to sort of be a part of Wemby's early career and Castle in a little bit. But, I mean, we're going to talk about Wemby. You know, he's on his way to being potentially the best player in the league, and he got to have a little bit of impact, and he's going to be around the organization. And we'll see what Mitch Johnson does, who did some good things for you all towards the end of the year. I was a little I'm not going to say surprised. I did think this was the most likely situation, but with some of the really big name coaches that were going to be available, surprised they didn't reach out. But I mean, who's to say that one of those coaches, either Malone or Taylor Jenkins, you know, they decide to sit a year out and Spurs have a bad season and they move on from Mitch Johnson and hire one of those guys? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But the Spurs I mean, obviously they've had great GM too, but there wasn't a more consistent great team year in, year out in my lifetime than the San Antonio Spurs organization. Obviously, haven't been as good in the past couple of years, but now they're making the moves to get back in those top seeds of the Western Conference. I mean, you can go through so many battles that they were a part of, dating back to the early days with the Shaq and Kobe series. I mean, the Hack-a-Shaq was sort of invented by Gregg Popovich, and then he would go on in so many LeBron series. He was known for how they would defend LeBron better than he had been defended, sort of making him become a jump shooter, which made LeBron have to work on his jump shot. And even going to the beginning of that Warriors run, the Spurs were, you know, they were putting up just as good a season, especially in the regular season, as the Spurs. And then, you know, the injuries sort of got on them late. But Kawhi Leonard in his prime, I mean, the most wins he ever had in a season was the 2015-16 season where the Spurs won 67 ball games. And I don't know, that team doesn't really get talked about enough. But I was never a Spurs fan, but you couldn't help but just appreciate the greatness, and you just knew what you were going to get from them night in, night out, and year in, year out. And this was to do with Gregg Popovich, and you've taught me about his coaching tree. He might have the best coaching tree. The only guy who you can compare it to in other sports is maybe a Nick Saban or a Bill Belichick, is how good his tree is. It's incredible. So almost every team in the league seems to have somebody from this Spurs organization that he sort of took in or helped along the way. So what a career, and hope he stays healthy. He's had some very serious health issues here. I didn't see any way he was going to be able to come back and coach again based on some of those things. So, you know, they're moving forward, but he's still going to be there. He still deserves and has earned any sort of input on any kind of decision that's going to happen and going forward. So, you know, shout out to Gregg Popovich, and I mean, you can make an argument that it was the best coaching career we've seen, and even just sports, not just basketball. This is bigger than just basketball. His impact on on what his impact was to a sport. So you gotta, when I think of Gregg Popovich, I think of names like Nick Saban, like Bill Belichick. Those sort of in my lifetime were always, regarded as the best coach in the league year in, year out. So it's going to be weird not seeing him on the sideline, but it's going to be interesting to see. But what a career. Just you got to tip your cap to a guy like this.
Yeah, and we talk about the coaching impact, and I brought up a little bit about the personal impact that he had on players, but this was a man that was revolutionary in terms of the scouting of the European player. Him and R.C. Buford kind of came in together. R.C. Buford, who's now the CEO of Spurs Sports and Entertainment, he kind of oversees everything basketball-wise. He's the right-hand man to the owner, Peter Holt. So those two came in together. R.C. Buford was the hand-picked general manager by the Spurs, and they came together as a collective and decided, we're going to scout and develop foreign talent. They went overseas. That was really the revolution. You saw Ginobili, you saw many of these guys, even Tim Duncan came from the U.S. Virgin Islands. They made it a point that we are going to develop because they saw the vision of the NBA and basketball as a whole as a global sport. And as we've transitioned now in today's world, we're going to get into Giannis here in a few minutes, but Giannis, Luka, Jokic, three of the best players in the world right now, they're all his foreign players. And so that was something that the Spurs, especially in the early 2000s, made a name for themselves of going overseas, scouting talent, developing talent. I mean, they were the kings of the draft and stash. You really saw that kind of come into play because of the Spurs organization. They've done transcendent in many different ways, the way that they've done things, and Pop has been the president for however many years. He oversees a lot of what they draft, and now you've got Brian Wright as the general manager as R.C. Buford has moved up. And so the continuity, and that was a big thing that they preached with hiring Mitch Johnson. Continuity, they wanted to remain stable with what they have built. That's why they handpicked R.C. Buford to give the job to Brian Wright. They handpicked Mitch Johnson to learn under Popovich for that to be an easy transition. So Mitch Johnson has been training there for 10 plus years now, and so they've kind of seen the vision, they've seen what he can do inside the building, and they're very confident, and they have spoken to that ad nauseum so far since the transition has been made. And so they're very bullish on what he can do as a head coach moving forward. And I suspect that, nothing's really going to change on a day-to-day operation for the Spurs. Popovich is going to have a heavy influence on basketball operations. He's going to be able to help Mitch Johnson every step of the way. And so it's just going to continue down this path, and they didn't want to mess up what they had building now with Fox, Wemby, Castle, and the draft picks that they've got moving forward. So it's going to be a very exciting future for the Spurs. We'll see what Mitch Johnson can do there. Excited to see Popovich stick around along with R.C. Buford, Brian Wright, and now Mitch Johnson as the head coach. But we'll move kind of forward, talk about two other interim head coaches now that are getting head coaching jobs with their teams, which is very interesting that we have gotten to this situation where three of the jobs that have opened up have all resulted in hiring the interim head coach, which I don't know how often that has happened in league history, but the Grizzlies have named Tomas Isalo as the head coach there, and then the Kings have retained Doug Christie as the head coach, and they're going to hire Mike Woodson, former Indiana basketball head coach, as their head assistant. So very interesting to see how this kind of plays out in terms of, I'll let you talk about your former team, the Grizzlies, in just a second. No, I'm just kidding. But I'll let you kind of dive into Isalo and what you saw from him. But the Kings, it's very interesting. Doug Christie, they had a very hot stretch after moving on from Mike Brown and Doug Christie taking over, and then it kind of cooled off towards the end of the year. Very interesting kind of Domantas Sabonis' comments towards the end of the year saying, look, we've got to get a point guard. We've got to kind of continue to develop. And, you saw them kind of just falter down the year. They didn't really have a clear direction. Doug Christie, I'm not sure how much support, because a lot of things with Mike Brown was, our practice schedule's too hard. He's too tough on the players. Doesn't give them enough breaks. And then it became a thing with Doug, like, oh, yeah, he's giving us more time off. And then as you got to the end of the year, it was like, well, we're not prepared enough because we're not in the building. We're not getting enough practice. That became the narrative with the Kings. And so very interesting to see, even with the new GM hire, outside GM hire, that they went in this direction. this just seems like it's destined to. I mean, it's the Kings organization, so it's destined to fail. I think Doug Christie in the right situation could be a good head coach. Obviously, this is a job that he coveted and wanted. Not sure how I feel about Mike Woodson. Clearly has not had a lot of basketball success, whether it's been the Knicks recently or IU. But interesting hire there. We'll see how that works out. But I'll let you kind of dive into Isalo before we get into some of the offseason trade, draft rumors, and other news and notes.
Yeah, so we're hiring Tomas Isalo, who we pulled away from Brooklyn and some other teams that were trying to get him in some sort of bidding war this past offseason. I'm not going to get into the situation where we fired Taylor Jenkins, but I want to make it clear that Isalo was hired by Zach Kleiman, and Taylor Jenkins had zero input or impact on that decision, which sort of raised the eyebrow to me and everyone else across the league. Hold on, your GM's not even complying with your head coach on your assistant here, which they don't have to, but it's some, normally in the normal situations they are at least broached with that. And you could sort of see the writing on the wall. You noted it quicker than most with the Taylor Jenkins situation, but I could just tell by how quickly things moved that this was going to happen. And I said it on the podcast when we did discuss this Taylor Jenkins firing, that I said we would retain Isalo as the head coach. And how I feel about it, I think it's not that I don't think I think he's going to be a pretty good coach in this league. There's issues beyond the head coaching chair with my Memphis Grizzlies, and it's embarrassing to even talk about. We made the playoffs this year whenever we were high up in the Western Conference, but everyone knew that we were never a team that was in serious contention, we got to be the only team that's in the West where you can say that. Like, we're sitting at the 2 seed in the Western Conference when no one even feels threatened by us, which even our own fans, including me, know that we were no threat. And it's, like I said, there's bigger issues going on in Memphis, which has a lot to do with the city itself. I'm not going to get into that as much. But, I mean, I'm happy for Tomas Isalo. I still will be a Taylor Jenkins guy for forever for what he's done for me and the Memphis Grizzlies organization. So, curious to see where he's going to end up. Not surprised that we made this move. But our issues are much deeper than who our head coach is going to be. I mean, our own supposed star player has just now figured out the Oklahoma City Thunder, he says. He says that he has figured them out, and that if he would have never got hurt, that it would have been no issue to come back. So it's just continued clown activity from some of the players in our organization. But I like it from an offensive standpoint, but the offense was never the issue. It was the defense. So, I'm going to root for Tomas Isalo. I'm going to give him a shot here next year. We'll see what he can do. He's obviously a bright mind coming over from the Euro League, but I'm nowhere near surprised on this move based on how things have went down. And, I'm going to root for him, like I said, but my expectations for next season are not very high, and that's nothing to do with him. It's more so, mainly Ja Morant and the roster as a whole, because Jaren Jackson Jr. is very overrated in my opinion. Desmond Bane had a good season, but can you trust him in the biggest of moments? I mean, Scottie Pippen Jr. was our best player for a lot of the season this year, and I just never thought I'd say those words out of my mouth. But, this works out for Scottie Pippen Jr. because he got a lot of good things out of him towards the end of the year. So that's our thing going forward. We got Scottie Pippen Jr. Let's go.
And it's very interesting now to see there's only one job available, really, at this point. I mean, we'll see what happens in Denver. I think Altman is very in the running to get that job, especially with the way that they handled business against the Clippers in the first round. But when you look at the Phoenix Suns job, do they want to go with another retread? And do they want to go with either Taylor Jenkins or Michael Malone? They want to go with Mike Brown? Like, they have gone with this veteran coaching, and they keep continuing to fire him. Is that even a job that either one of those guys would even want? I mean, it's a roster that's about to implode, most likely. We'll see. We're about to talk about Durant here in just a second, but a lot of talented coaching out there, not a lot of jobs opening up. We'll see what happens the rest of the playoffs, whether there are firings that are made as a result of some of these playoff decisions. Are the Bucks going to move on from Doc Rivers? Probably not, considering the situation that occurred for him to get that job. A lot of different things could play a factor in that. Does Michael Malone, does Taylor Jenkins, do these guys want to take bench jobs? And what's really interesting is we just talked about the Spurs. Keep an eye out on the Spurs. Mike Budenholzer, very good relationship within that organization, very good relationship with Pop. Obviously, with Pop moving on, the Spurs have an open bench slot, so they're going to be looking to add to their bench. They're going to want to probably put another very experienced coach. What the Spurs have done in recent years is they've always promoted young guys that have learned under Pop's system, and that was the thing with Mitch, is promote young guys, let them learn, and then they go off and be their own head coach. Very rarely have they brought back. They brought back Brett Brown, so they brought back some veteran coaches throughout different periods. They brought in Tim Duncan to be an assistant at one point. Like, they've done some different things, but they primarily promoted young guys. So this could be a situation now where you've got the young guy going to head coach. Do we want to bring in Mike Budenholzer or one of these guys to come back, be an assistant, help Mitch Johnson? That would be something to keep an eye on. But there's plenty of things to look at when you come to this head coaching, and we talked about it. Head coaching matters. We just saw Tyronn Lue crap down his leg. J.J. Redick had no idea how to manage rotation. So it's a big period, and it's a big time for these teams, especially like Spurs, Grizzlies, Kings. These are all teams that will be in the playoff contention next year, we imagine. And so they've got to get this coaching decision right, and then the Suns, we will see what they do. But anyways, time to move on. We're going to talk about what I think is going to be intriguing to a lot of people, and it's going to be a massive story over the next probably 2 months, is the trade market, what's going to happen in terms of player movement, the draft, picks. Draft lottery is a week away. Next Monday is we're going to see who gets Cooper Flag. So it's going to be a big part of today's conversation. We're going to jump right into it. We talked about the Bucks a little bit. Damian Lillard tears his ACL. The Bucks
Tears
lose
his Achilles. Not ACL.
Oh, yeah, Achilles. You're right. Tears his Achilles. It was kind of a gruesome, and you see it. I mean, immediately he went down. He grabs the back of his ankle, Achilles. Very telltale sign after coming back from a blood clot. And so now there's questions about Giannis Antetokounmpo. Where is he going to go? Will he regress out? He's said over and over he wants to win in Milwaukee, but it has to make sense for him to be there. They have to be competitive. At this point, with Lillard now being out, is he going to be able to put together a team around Giannis? That I'm not sure of. So this could be the offseason where Giannis requests a trade, and there are many different teams that he could end up on.
Yeah, so the news broke a day or two after they gentlemen swept by the Pacers by Shams that Giannis was set to meet with the Bucks organization over the next coming days to discuss the future of him in Milwaukee. And based on, if you follow Giannis's comments over the years, you can tell he wants to win. Obviously, he said that. He's came out and said that many times. That's why he wanted to go get a guy in Damian Lillard. And he's even talked about how he would like for European players to be in bigger markets. So this was discussed by him whenever the Luka trade happened in the middle of the year. He said he wants these European players like him, like a Jokic, like a Luka, to go to these New York, to go to these LA teams, and he now has a chance to force his way out. And I believe he should do that if he wants to get the most out of his career, because there's no shot that they are going to win another championship with Milwaukee. In my opinion, they've been going out in the first round year in, year out. He just had arguably his best season ever and had a tremendous first round series, and they got gentlemen swept by a Pacers team who's very good, but they don't have, the superstars on their team. So I think he should and will force his way out unless Jimmy Haslam can convince him to stay, which Jimmy Haslam does not have a great track record of things, but they're not going to win a championship, so I think they should start. Giannis is 30 years old. If you're going to trade him, this is the time where you're going to get the most out of him. So a couple teams, and you'll talk about it here, but a couple teams that jump off the page. The favorite for Giannis to land is Brooklyn. But if you're Giannis, you need to try and hardball your way to one of these teams that can be a contender right away. The Brooklyn Nets are not much better than the Milwaukee Bucks. They have the best draft pick capital, in my opinion, possibly, to give to the Bucks, who need plenty of draft picks out of this trade. So Brooklyn Nets are a team. The New York Knicks, we'll see. I think the comments about big markets, Giannis in New York he immediately becomes the best player in Knicks history right off the bat. And if you could somehow pair him up
does he though? Where does Patrick Ewing kind of stand in that?
I think Giannis is already a top 20 player all time. He's got multiple MVPs. He's got defensive player of the year.
In terms of historic, I mean, you could argue that, but he's going to have to prove something in the.
Oh yeah, I meant just from a
pure talent standpoint. Yeah,
I'm saying
right.
From just like a historical, all-time lineup standpoint. Like he's the most talented. He's the most. He's got the best legacy and resume as anyone would have, because I think he's already a top 20 player. But anyways, the Knicks, they've been making splash moves every single offseason to try and shorten the gap between them and Boston or whoever else in the Eastern Conference. I think the Celtics are going to win in 4 or 5 games. So where do you go if you're the Knicks? The only reason I can see the Knicks maybe not doing it is just because they've just been so aggressive year in, year out. Do they continue to take another risk? But they should be wanting to get a championship, especially in this Brunson window. So the Knicks are a team. The Rockets are a team that's depending on how their season ends. And, there could be a team that no one's discussing with Giannis that could sort of get into play. It would be hard to happen, but the Oklahoma City Thunder, let's say they lose to Denver, which nobody thinks they will. Could he end up in Oklahoma City? They would have a very good package to put together, but would they be willing to blow up their young team to do this? There's a number of teams, but I think a team that isn't necessarily being talked about is going to end up winning this. If this is all dependent on if he forces his way out, because they're not just going to give him away. They're not going to give him away. So he's going to have to put his foot down and say, I need to leave. But if you're the Bucks, I think you should do this, because I don't see you winning a championship and maximize the acquisitions you can get back and make this public, unlike the Mavericks did with Luka. They could have gotten much more out of that Luka trade. Giannis can bring in a number of things, and he's going to have to based on his contract alone. But they're going to need picks back. They're going to need pretty good players back. So I'll let you get into some of what some of these teams can maybe give up to get a Giannis, and where do you think he could end up if he forces his way out?
Yeah, we mentioned Brooklyn. I mean, they've got very high level picks, but what if you're Brooklyn, you're very far away, in my opinion, from competing. And Giannis obviously makes your team better, but does he make you a championship contender right now? I don't think he does. I don't think Giannis would want to go to Brooklyn, and so that's not even something that I'm like feasibly looking at. They've got the cap space to where they can trade for Giannis plus go out and get somebody in free agency or make another trade, but that one doesn't seem too logical to me. You mentioned the Knicks. That's going to be very tough. They're going to break up the core that they just traded for. They're going to be lacking picks because of what they traded away to get Mikal Bridges. You got to think that they may be kicking themselves for doing that now because with Giannis potentially coming available, they could have used all those assets to go out and get him, and now it's going to be you're going to have to see, do the Bucks want Karl-Anthony Towns and Bridges and some scraps? I don't know that that's something that's going to be too formidable. The one that I'm double circling, and we're going to get into not only Giannis but also Kevin Durant, you got to think the Houston Rockets here are going to be a big contender, and they can start off. If you're the Rockets, you're going to offer Jalen Green, probably Reed Shepherd and picks, and see the starting point of that. If you're the Rockets, you're going to try to get this done as few picks as possible. You'd probably rather give your picks, but it's going to be demanded that it has to be the Phoenix picks because they're an inch away from just implosion. For the Bucks, you're also asking for Amen Thompson. That's your first ask. You're asking for Alperen Şengün. That's your first ask. You're trying to get one of those players. I mean, you're going to try to get back somebody that holds significant value from we can quickly rebuild the team around said player. The Rockets, I think, out of all realistic trade teams, can give you the best in terms of that because they do have Şengün, who is an all-star. They do have Amen Thompson, who has a very bright future, a limited ceiling, just with the lack of jump shot and the lack of true scoring potential, but an all-time athletic player in the league, great defender. So those are the two players, and if this becomes a public trade request, demand, / I'm giving a list of teams, we've seen it historically, the trade package typically drops at that point because they know that the Bucks are going to be backed against the wall. So I think it's going to end up falling on, they're going to get Jalen Green, they're going to get Jabari Smith, it's going to be Reed Shepherd. Those are probably the three players that you're looking at in terms of right away in the trade. No doubts about it. And then it's the Phoenix picks is what I would go to if I'm Milwaukee. I'm asking for all the Phoenix picks. You probably are going to get 2 Phoenix picks in 25 and 27. They also have a swap with Brooklyn in 2027. That's a pick that if I'm Milwaukee, I'm probably asking for, and then you can probably get a pick down the line from Houston themselves, or you can ask for additional swaps. They have Phoenix and Dallas swap rights in 2029 that you could ask for those swap rights because that could be very intriguing with the murky futures in those two organizations. So that's step one if I'm Milwaukee. Step 2, another team that I don't think we talk about enough, the Orlando Magic. This would be, I mean, we saw the fight that they were able to put up. Could you imagine they get Giannis Antetokounmpo, put him next to Paolo Banchero, maybe Franz Wagner if they're able to keep him? They're very high on Jalen Suggs. He got hurt towards the end of the year, so we didn't see a lot of that. I would think that you probably will have to include, and you're going to include one of those two, Franz or Jalen Suggs. If I'm Milwaukee, I'm probably asking for Franz, and that would probably be the one that Orlando's more willing to give because Suggs is more of a guard, and Giannis would take over the position that Franz would be playing. You got Wendell Carter, who probably ends up in this trade. Anthony Black probably ends up in this trade. And then they still have Denver's first-round pick this year. They've got their own first-round picks. They've got Phoenix and Washington swaps in 26. They've got all their own picks they can throw at them, which they're not going to be great picks, unlike what Houston can offer. And so that's going to be a little bit more difficult, but it's another team where you get a pretty damn good player on top of a bunch of picks, whether it's Franz Wagner or Suggs likely included. That would be something that would intrigue me, and I think Orlando would be stupid not to go after it, but again, it's an in-division trade. So is it super likely? Probably not, but that's one that I'm heavily pursuing. Detroit is, again, they've got all their picks. They probably like to hold on to a sore, but you can throw in Ron Holland. They're going to want to keep Duren. They just don't have a ton of players that, without gutting the roster, that they can throw in. It's going to have to include Tobias Harris for salary purposes. They're going to have to probably include Isaiah Stewart for salary purposes. And again, you got pretty much all your picks moving forward. So that's something that could be interesting. I think it's going to be a little bit harder because they don't have the quality of players maybe that what some of these other teams have. It's every single time that we're going to have a trade being mentioned, the Miami Heat are going to be thrown into it because it's a destination. Realistically, for a player like Giannis, they have nowhere near what it's going to take to get it done. They don't have very many first-round picks whatsoever moving forward. They don't really have signature players. They're not going to want Wiggins and Hayward Highsmith and Jovic. I mean, they might want Ware, but it's not. Miami Heat are not super realistic in this. I think they would be a more realistic Kevin Durant trade package, and we'll get into that later. Another team, you mentioned it, Thunder. The Thunder have no incentive to blow up the roster. They just need to keep building out what they have. But if it comes down to it, they've got premium players, premium picks. Would they give up Williams or Holmgren to get it done? They could. Again, they've got so many picks. They're not maybe the highest quality picks. I mean, they do have the Clippers. We'll see what happens with them over the next few years. Philadelphia's pick is protected. If that Philadelphia pick ends up out of that 1-6 protection this year, ends up on like the 7 line, this gets really interesting then because you get a premium pick this year in a pretty good draft class, and then they can throw together Hartenstein, Holmgren, Williams, one of those guys. You can throw in Kasey and Wallace. They have Nikola Topic, who we haven't seen play yet, but has some potential. So the Thunder become interesting, but I don't think the Thunder themselves are going to be too interested in pursuing a trade. The Warriors actually could get into this and give.
And they've tried.
They have tried. They tried to get Kevin Durant at the deadline. They obviously ended up with Draymond Green. They tried to get Larry Markkinen from Utah over the offseason. They've got Moses Moody. They've got Podziemski. They've got plenty of picks. They've got all their picks pretty much moving forward. So we'll see what happens there. Kuminga, big question mark. Is Kuminga even a valued asset in the NBA at this point? That's something. I don't know how you'll feel about it, but the Grizzlies, I mean,
I would love it.
Would they do Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yes.
and stuff? I mean,
I'd love that.
Is it even possible? You don't have a first-round pick this year.
Yeah,
you've got a swap pick in 26 you can throw together, and then you can just continue to throw in 28, 30, and just see where it lands you. That is something that I don't think they've got enough to get it done just from a pick standpoint.
He would probably veto it anyways.
And we've seen players not want to go to Memphis in the past. That's one. I mean, Memphis went big fish hunting at the deadline.
Had a deal done for Durant.
So that's something. And then, of course, you can bring in the Spurs here. Devin Vassell would have to be in the deal. And then you're probably looking at they're gonna come out and ask for Stephon Castle, as they should. I mean, he is reigning Rookie of the Year. He gives you somebody that you can at least kind of bookend as a future player for you. If I'm the Spurs, I'd be very hesitant to move away from Stephon Castle. We saw what I'm not saying he's going to end up being Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but you look what a desperation trade from the Clippers to try to get Paul George next to Kawhi Leonard. Not saying that Paul George is Giannis Antetokounmpo, and not saying that Castle is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but it has that kind of stars written on me because I don't think that the Spurs team is ready to compete yet. Even if you trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo, you're still going to have to build the foundation of the roster around Wembanyama, Fox, and Giannis. You're going to have to put some bench guys together. And if you've got, the Spurs have just as many picks as any other team in the league, and the quality of picks they have is just as high, considering they've got the Atlanta picks. You've got a Sacramento swap, which if I'm a team trading with the Spurs, I'm saying give me the Sacramento swap, give me the Boston swap in a couple years, give me the Dallas Mavericks swap in a couple years, give me all the Atlanta picks. And so they have the quality of picks to get it done. They've got the players to get it done. The Spurs, we have not typically seen them be very aggressive on the trade front, and so it'll be interesting They're not trading Fox. They just traded for him. I expect him to get an extension this offseason. So it's going to be Vassell, Barnes, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Shohan, Castle.
Imagine the new updated Twin Towers, though.
Yeah, I mean,
Giannis and
very
Wemby
scary.
Together.
I mean, that in terms of you're putting a duo together, there is not a better team in this trade than to put Giannis Antetokounmpo next to Victor Wembanyama.
Which I think if Giannis is going to have any say in this, I do believe, like I said, the big markets he's going to be a fan of. But this is a team that I could see him putting on a short list if he's going to have it, just because,
Definitely.
Everyone respects Victor Wembanyama as a talent, and even some of the matchups that they've had head-to-head, they've sort of gone at each other, and Wemby has not backed down from Giannis in the matchups that they've had.
Tremendous respect between the two of them, and we've seen that.
And he's another European player, which Giannis loves those guys, so I think this should be on his short list. Whether or not it actually happens, that's unclear, but normally y'all wouldn't make a trade like this, but normally y'all wouldn't make the Fox trade either. So
yeah,
maybe things are changing in a way. And there's not many times where you get a Giannis on the trade block. I mean, it rarely ever happens. I mean, the guy's a top 20 player of all time. He's probably on the back end of his prime, but he's coming off of a 31 12 and 6 year, giving you almost, probably 60% from the field. He still can block shots, and he's as good as he ever was. But obviously, he doesn't have 10 more years of this in him.
No.
But if a team wants to maximize their championship window, I mean, there's not going to be a better time to do it with this guy available.
And that's the thing, and that's the sticking point with what people are saying with the Spurs. You got Victor Wembanyama still on his rookie contract, and so for the market value, he is extremely cheap right now, only making about $13.5 a year. So you can build expensive players around him, which is what you've seen with Fox. They've given Vassell the contract extension. They can afford, salary-wise, to easily get Giannis's salary to fit in with Fox and Wemby, with what Wemby is making right now. And so financially, they can easily get this done. And so it's very interesting. They would definitely be on the short list if I was Giannis, as would Houston. So that, I mean, two Texas teams right there. The Knicks would be interesting. I would be very intrigued about playing in Orlando if I was Giannis. Maybe not the type of market that Miami has, but you're still down in Central Florida. You've got a very talented player next to you in Paolo Banchero, and if they keep Suggs or Wagner, that's another super talented player. Team I hadn't mentioned that I've seen thrown around in trades, people are very curious. There's question marks, there are asterisks, there are what is going on in Philadelphia this offseason. It's going to be a big discussion. Do they just try to run it back and hope to be healthy with Embiid, Paul George, Maxey, Jared McCain? Or are we at the point where they're saying, let's trade every pick and Paul George we got and try to pair up Giannis with Joel? I wouldn't do it if I was Milwaukee. I would run as fast as I can away from trying to get Paul George. But if they keep their pick this year, it's going to be automatically top 6, so that could be thrown in. Because they're not, I mean, they're at the point where if these guys are healthy, they want to compete for a title. And so what is a top 6 pick going to do for you? If it doesn't end up being Cooper Flag, I think you just say, here, Milwaukee, here's Paul George, here's that top 6 pick, here's 27, here's a pick via the Clippers in 2028.
Is there any shot that they would throw is Embiid anywhere near the block here? I mean, I wouldn't understand why a team would trade for Embiid.
If you're the 76ers and you get the first overall pick, I am hitting that big red reset button. I am trying to trade Embiid and Paul George. Keep Maxey, obviously. He's young. Keep McCain. And build it from there. But again, this is a podcast that we're talking about potential trades. Embiid is a fascinating one.
I think that they should do everything in their power to get any sort of trade value for Joel Embiid. because arguably they should have done it. You can argue they should have done this last year when the Knicks tried to go get Embiid instead of Karl Anthony Towns.
I mean, could you imagine if they got out ahead of it and they got the Bridges contract the Bridges trade for Embiid?
Yeah, so that's the deal with Giannis here. That's why I think if you're the Bucks, if you're smart, you realize where you're at. Your second best player probably isn't going to dribble a single ball next season. And
even after that, he's a small guard with an Achilles tear. Like, he's never going to be the same again.
36.
Yeah, he's been 36 by the time he plays again.
This is the time, and I understand you don't want to trade your best player just because he brings you so much to the city. He brings you a lot of money. But if you're just looking at it long term, what's the best thing going forward to give you the most success in the future? You got to get out ahead of it, just like Philly should have done. And I do think Giannis is head and shoulders better than Joel Embiid, don't get me wrong. But it's a similar situation. They're similar ages. They're both big guys. Giannis isn't going to be playing until he's 42 years old. So, like, I don't know. We went through a lot of these teams, and I think it would be really good for the ratings if an off-season day and a random July day where we get a notification that Giannis is headed to the Western Conference. I think
if it's going to happen, it's going to happen within the next month because the draft's going to happen before July even gets here. We got the draft lottery coming up. You're going to have everybody talking to everybody at the combine here.
Free agency.
It's going to happen. Because these teams that get lucky in the lottery that might be like the Rockets, they've got a lottery pick here because of Phoenix. The Spurs, they've got a lottery pick like the Philadelphia 76ers.
Even the Thunder.
The Thunder have a pick. If that pick falls, yeah. And so the teams that are going to be gearing up to be able to make this move are going to want to do it before the draft. And the draft's going to happen in about a month and a half from now.
That's just... I don't like how the draft sits with the schedule just because it's right after the season ends.
Yeah, like right after the NBA Finals, the draft is within a week and a half.
The thing is Milwaukee's already out, but some of the teams that they're going to want to be talking to are still playing. So that's what makes it weird, the timing of it. Yeah, I'm not a fan of when the draft is, in my opinion, but there's not. The NBA's off-season is very short in and of itself. The season's going to pick back up in, October or so? Yeah. So, you've only got 2 or 3 months.
Once the finals ends, off-season goes immediately, and then there's just a dead period for about a month and a half, 2 months, and then the season starts ramping back up. But it happens very quickly. Yeah. And if you don't see a Giannis trade happen immediately, that could tell me that, hey, this is going to linger, and we could be talking about this all the way up until next trade deadline.
But that's the thing. If they wait until the deadline, the value is going to drop maybe in half. They're still going to get a lot for him. He's Giannis, but
the thing with Giannis too is
you got to make it as loud as possible.
He's going to have 3 more years on his contract for whoever trades for him. But that's the thing about it is if you get ahead of it in the offseason, you're going to have teams that are more financially, from a salary cap standpoint, from a future money allocation standpoint, are going to be more prepared for it to do it now in the offseason than they will be at the deadline next year.
Trade the whole team. Get Giannis, please.
So,
I'll be all back in.
We can talk about this for hours upon hours upon hours, but we're going to continue to do it over the next few weeks. But before we kind of wrap up this episode, we'll just hit a lot of the teams that we're going to talk about, a lot of the players that we're going to talk about are going to have very similar markets. Yeah. So, next player we're going to bring up, Kevin Durant, it's the same thing. The Rockets are going to be mentioned. The Spurs are going to be mentioned. The Magic, I think, would be a tremendous team for them. I'm going to keep bringing up the Magic.
Yeah.
Because I really like the outlook of that, and they show me a lot down the end of the year. The Timberwolves are a very interesting Durant team.
They've been linked to him.
And I don't bring up the Timberwolves in terms of a Giannis team because I don't think they nearly have the assets that maybe you need. But
imagine Wemby and Ant and Giannis together. That would be
Durant, in my opinion. Because Durant's going to be 37 by the time the season kicks off next year. he's had issues the last several stops.
Injuries
Just for
as well.
injury, like there's a lot of reasons why he's just not going to go for nearly as much, and that's where it's going to put a team like the Timberwolves in striking range. They're going to be able to throw together McDaniels and maybe one or two picks, and that could be close to on the doorstep. And I think the Timberwolves would definitely be a team like.
Do you think there's a way they could get out of it without giving up McDaniels, or they got to do it salary wise?
If Dillingham had
They're
maybe
go-
showed enough
They're
this
gonna
year,
lose.
I mean,
Nas
Terrence
Reed.
Shannon, they're going to lose Nas Reed most likely in the offseason. They're just not going to be able to afford to pay him.
Rudy, I mean,
But because of salary, you're going to have to do McDaniels. Let's just mess with it here. If you go for Durant, you're going to have to at least do McDaniels. You're probably going to have to do DiVincenzo, and you're probably going to have to do Dillingham just from a salary cap standpoint purpose. Unless, I mean, that doesn't even work from a salary standpoint.
I mean, you could get some other teams involved
Yeah.
as well. I think.
And if you're going to have probably, if it comes down to it, you're going to have to do Randall maybe instead of DiVincenzo, and then you get there salary-wise.
See, then I just don't really like it.
I mean,
from
that's
a,
not even that's going to fail in terms of what the Phoenix Suns can do. So they're going to be able to get this done in some sort of way.
Yeah.
But it's going to be either
It'll. I think it's going to work. This is why at the end of the season, the timing of these decisions are going to have to be so quick because.
and the likelihood of it is most of these teams already know. They've been talking. They're going to
Well,
sit down
yeah,
together
but-
at the NBA Combine in about a week and a half from now.
But let's say the Wolves make it to the finals. All of a
Yes,
sudden,
I mean-
why would they want to? Why would they want to move things around? This is why the timing of it is very crucial here.
I mean, that's a very good point. So that's the Wolves would be somebody I'd be very interested to see. The Clipper. I mean, what are the Clippers going to do? They don't have the assets to get it done.
But they're always an aggressive team, and
Very much so.
Dallas.
Dallas is going to be very aggressive. Do they have? I mean, do they have the assets to
They
get it
don't
done? The
have
Grizzlies
much
have
to
already
get.
been told no from Durant. The picks from the Dallas. I mean, you don't really have control. You can't really trade your own pick this year because of the step-in rule. So
But
you're going to be handcuffed.
I think Durant. He mentioned, after he vetoed the trade to the Warriors, that the main reason he did so was because he was just afraid of going to another team, knowing that they just gave up and gutted their roster just to get
exactly.
him, and that could be a smart thing in the time for him because now the trade value isn't as high as it was at that deadline. So I think it could work out better for him depending on where he goes, and I hope he goes to a contender. I don't want to see him, go to a team and have some of these issues because he's too good of a player to deal with some of the things in Phoenix that's gone on here, and he's to blame for that in some ways. But I'd like to see Durant make another run somewhere, whether if that's back in the Eastern Conference or staying in the Western Conference. But he's going to be on the move. It's pretty much a done deal. The Giannis isn't so much a done deal, but from all accounts, Windhorst, Shams, everybody has got Durant. It's gone.
How crazy is Matt Ishbia? Would he offer Durant for Giannis and try to just piece things together to where
I think there's no
Phoenix
doubt.
would try to get Giannis on the? I mean, that's
I think, Ishbia
could
has
be.
been so aggressive each and every deadline, each and every offseason. You can't even tell what they're going to do, but
'cause they
easily,
went out-
I think
they
they'll
went out and got.
talk to Milwaukee. And
They traded their own 2030 or 31 pick to get 3 first-round picks. If you do Durant and those picks for Giannis, what's the Milwaukee Bucks' answer? If they don't get something they like from these other teams, could they just ship them? I mean, there's no way Durant would want to go to do that, especially with Dame being hurt. But Matt Ishbia is crazy. We could see something off the wall.
He
We
says
haven't
he's
really
never going to rebuild.
We haven't even really mentioned the Pacers among all this. What happens with them? I mean, they've got plenty of assets to kind of move. I mean, they got players that are going to be coveted. Like Andrew Nembhard's a coveted player around the league. His style. Neesmith's a shooter who's had a good year. Mathurin, they're gonna have to pay him at some point. Can they get out of that contract before they got to pay him?
I'd like for him to go somewhere else.
So that's a team that could be interesting. And then kind of moving off the Durant thing, because it's going to be the same teams. The Spurs are going to be able to do Vassell and Keldon to get put together. But it's the same thing I talked about with Giannis. They're skipping steps in that scenario. So we'll see. It's the same teams. The Rockets are going to be very heavy in that one, and that's one that would intrigue Phoenix because they have their picks. But a team that has just recently become in the light for the offseason, the Boston Celtics are very rumored to – they're not going to be able to keep this roster together, whether that means they're probably going to keep Tatum and Brown, but Holiday, Kristaps, Derek White, Pritchard, can they keep all of these guys? Seems like no. Seems like Kristaps is probably the first one to go. Is Drew Holiday at his age somebody that they're fine moving off of? Can they convince Horford to come back and play again at a discounted rate? Seems like that's going to be quite the offseason for the Boston Celtics. If they can repeat, and then it's going to be very quick decision-making right after that.
Yeah, they're definitely a team to keep an eye on. This team will look much different next year, and the past couple years I see them putting together a max contract deal. I'm saying, how in the world are they doing this over and over and over? And eventually it's going to come back against them. But the good thing is they have 2 all-star potential Hall of Fame players that they're always going to have on their team to build around. So if you're a Celtics fan, yes, your team's going to look much different, but as long as you can get pieces that just fit around them, 3-and-D guys may not be the caliber of some of the guys you have, but I wouldn't be as concerned. And even they have been under the radar team that's tried to be very aggressive in some trades
tried
that
to
didn't
trade
work out.
Jaylen Brown for Durant just not too long ago.
Yeah, and that was when he was with Brooklyn. So who knows? They intrigue me. I mean, I think Brad Stevens might be the smartest general manager in basketball. I think he's got a plan that he knows what he's going to do here, and he's going to keep that under wraps as long as he can. So their future is, murky as far as their complete roster in some aspect, but I trust Brad Stevens and his plan, whatever it may be, and I don't know what it is, but it's not going to be hard for people to convince players to come play there based on having Tatum and Brown. But a team to keep an eye on really quickly here, and they've already came out and said that they're going to be aggressive, is the Los Angeles Lakers as they try and maximize this last year. We assume LeBron's going to pick up the player option, although I think if he really wants the best shot at a championship, decline the player option and sign a lower deal to get somebody else. But the most likely situation, he picks up this player option for $53 million next year. They re-sign Luka Doncic as soon as he's extension eligible here in a couple months, maybe even weeks at this point, and they have no choice but to go get a big man. And I think every player on their roster other than Luka and LeBron can be traded. And now all Lakers fans want Reeves traded, and maybe they should have let him go at the deadline. But I still think he has very good value, but this playoff run definitely hurt it. It hurt it in some way. I'm still don't know how he's not a Dallas Maverick at this point, but keep an eye on Nico Harrison to make another deal with Rob Pelinka in a Gafford move. I think Gafford could be moved this offseason somewhere. I've talked about that a couple times in a couple episodes. I think Gafford could be moved. The Lakers would love a guy in Gafford. Now, would Nico Harrison want to deal with the sort of pushback he's going to get for making another deal with Rob Pelinka? I don't know. But I think it could be smart for both ways because you can get they've got pieces. I don't think the Lakers team is great, but they've got players that other teams would like to have. Reeves for sure, but what can they get out of Reeves this offseason? We'll see. I mean, he's shown he can be a guy who can go average over 20 points a game. He can be a catch-and-shoot guy. He can handle the ball. He can pass the ball very well. He's just not a very good defender. So we'll see what they do, but they have to go get a big guy. And I really don't know who it would be. The first guy I can think of is Gafford, and
I got a couple names in mind. We talked about Giannis. We turned back the clock about 7-8 years. They go get Brook Lopez if the Milwaukee Bucks just completely ship out everything. Pretty good rim protector, gives a little floor spacing.
And he's been on the Lakers.
That's what I said. Been on the Lakers. We'll see what happens in Brooklyn, but Nicholas Claxton would be somebody of interest. I know there was heavy rumors about him and Cam Johnson's future at the deadline. That's a name I'd be interested in. Then you're looking at, again, Mark Williams, who they tried to trade for. That seems like it's a closed door.
Seems like it's not going to happen.
Is Jakob Poeltl somebody that the Raptors are going to trade? From what I understood, the Lakers offered all the picks that they're able to offer, plus some of these players, to Utah for Walker Kessler. Was it something that I saw
I think
recently?
They should probably did that.
Apparently the Jazz turned him down at the deadline for that, so that's something that maybe could be revisited.
There's just not a lot of great.
Yeah, could they go to the Trailblazers and offer for Robert Williams? So
they need a rim protector / lob catcher.
Yeah,
is
so
what's
that's
going to be.
They've got a very specific prototype of player that is not readily abundantly available,
And I think the NBA as a whole could play hardball with the Lakers this offseason.
Force them to give every pick that they've got.
And they're going to be willing to do so. Rob Pelinka's already came out and said they're going to be aggressive. There's no other way. He's not hiding it. He knows the position that they're in. He wants to maximize LeBron's window here. And Luka is going to have more input on this decision than probably anyone, especially since he's their young guy going forward. So we'll see. We know what he wants. He wants a guy like he had in Dallas, but he's not getting lively. I can tell you that. Gafford's a guy, but yeah, you mentioned Kessler. That could be. He's a very good defensive player. They need a rim protector. They might need 2 rim protectors, to be honest, as much drives as they give up with LeBron, Luka, and Reeves. I could see them moving Reeves. Rui gave them good year this year, but could he be moved? Finney-Smith they added at the not the deadline, but before the deadline with the D-Lo deal. The Lakers will make a move. We don't know what it will be, but they will be doing something to be active, as they always are in the offseason.
Yeah, and we're going to see something from the Lakers, and like you said, they're going to be willing to give up those 2 picks, and whether that be for Claxton or Kessler or whoever, we're going to see them make a move. But before we wrap up, one last player that I think is very polarizing that we should hit on, Zion Williamson. A lot of buzz generating about what the Pelicans are going to do. DeJounte Murray got injured. They've got McCollum. Trey Murphy had a pretty good year until he got hurt. So interesting to see where Zion Williamson's going to end up. If they get number one pick, Flag. I mean,
they're going to get a top-tier player, though, in the draft, more than likely.
Like what happened when they had Anthony Davis and drafted Zion. They might jump up, get Flag, and be comfortable moving on from Zion and restarting. Some teams that I would kind of look at, the Charlotte Hornets could put something together, put him next to LaMelo Ball. That would be, they are desperate just for anything.
Must-see TV.
They are desperate for anything that's going to sell tickets and improve them. We'll see. Brandon Miller's been up and down throughout the start of his career.
He missed a lot of this past season.
Missed a lot of this year. Bridges, a very controversial player, up and down. Got Yusuf Nurkic at the deadline. He's not going to probably be anything for them long term. Mark Williams is back with them. They almost traded him. He's back. Who knows what his future is there. He's probably going to want out of there. Another team, I talked about him earlier, as sneaky Giannis teams. Detroit, if they could put him and just replace him with Tobias Harris.
That could be.
Cade and Zion would be must-see TV. That would be a fun landing spot. A team, I think, that the most realistic we always mention this team in every single trade. The most realistic player they could get, Zion Williamson to the Miami Heat. This would be something that would be incredibly fun. Bam's a guy that if the Heat strike on everything and decide we just need to kind of reload, Bam could be a guy that could be available this offseason. I think Hero showed enough that they feel comfortable building around him. What do they do with Bam? That's something that's incredibly interesting. And then a team that doesn't get enough love that I really enjoyed watching at times this year, the Portland Trail Blazers. Denny Avdia was a rock star this year, somebody that I really wanted in his draft class. Went to the Wizards. Wizards recently traded him away. Shaedon Sharp is a stud. They're going to have to pay him. Scoot Henderson finally started to kind of figure it out towards the end of the year. If they can put together a lineup of Henderson, Sharp, Avdia, Zion, and then you've got a collection of bigs, whether it's Klingon, Ayton, Robert Williams. One of them, I would imagine, would not be on the roster. Tamari Kamara
he had a very
fun year from him. The Portland Trailblazers, I think, are a sneaky team this offseason. Would they get in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes? Maybe. But Zion would be a very fun addition to this roster. So they would be a team that I would kind of look at as a sneaky team for Zion.
Yeah, I mean, even your Spurs and maybe the Bucks would do something. Maybe Phoenix.
Would the Mavericks want to have Kyrie, Zion, and AD?
I mean,
AD wants to play with the traditional center, but that would be something that would be fun.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Zion, like Durant, I want him to go to a team that is a contender because, I mean, his career numbers are so good. It's just when he plays is the only issue with him. I think it will depend on where the Pelicans get in this lottery, but anyway they go, they're probably going to get a top 5 for sure, which is going to lead them with, could be whether if it's Flag or Bailey or whoever it'll be, they're going to get a player that they're going to want to try and build around. So the Pelicans roster has a lot of players that I'm not necessarily high on, and they're paying them a good amount of money. And DeJounte Murray, they're paying C.J. McCollum, 2 guys who I'm not necessarily super high on. So if I was them, I would try to move some of those guys. But who knows what they want to do? They fired their GM and hired I can't remember who they hired. Was it Joe Dumars?
Joe Dumars yeah.
Look for him to make some sort of move. I mean, he's been ahead of he's had a very high position within the league, I think, with the suspensions, or he was the head of that. So he's left that to go be a general manager. So he's been around the league. He knows the league very well. We'll see.
Very prominent in the Pistons organization for a while. Like, he's had very high-ranking executive positions.
I wouldn't be shocked if he makes some sort of aggressive move. But I mean, we've talked about a lot of guys here that could be on the move, and we might not see any of them move, mainly besides Durant. But I think, the NBA offseason rarely disappoints, so I think we could be in store for another very entertaining NBA offseason, which it's always fun seeing those trades, thinking about how they're going to work, how they won't work. But a thing to keep an eye on is the picks. Who gets the pick swaps? No one really cares about that stuff until this lottery comes around, and it really affects.
Draft lottery is going to have massive ripple effects.
And the Thunder are going to be in this lottery conversation year in, year out, and they're arguably the best team in the league. So shout out to Sam Presti and what he's done over there. But anyways, there's a lot of moving pieces before this lottery and then the draft itself. Trades, free agency. We could see a much different NBA, which almost helps the NBA in ratings in a way to have so much turnaround. It's what makes it fun for a lot of fans, including myself. I think it's fun to see stars move around, especially to go to bigger markets. So I think it'd be interesting to see. Giannis is the main guy we talked about today, and rightfully so. Where will Giannis end up?
Yeah, it's been fun to kind of take a look at all this, and like we said, none of this could happen, or all of this could happen, but it's setting up to be a very dramatic offseason. There's a lot on the line, a lot of big names, a lot of stars, a lot of teams with playoff aspirations, championship aspirations. So leave us your comments on who you think is going to be traded, where you think players are going to go, best landing spots, who has the best package to give up. And this has been a midweek edition of the State Line Fast Break podcast. We appreciate you guys listening. Give us suggestions on how we can improve the podcast. We've kind of tinkered with some different audio stuff and mess with formatting, and we're going to experiment with some of these dual podcasts. We're going to have more time to maybe record more episodes moving forward, but we want to take a look at the off season, as there's so much to talk about. So we've had so much news and caught up in the playoffs, we weren't able to kind of mix this in with our normal podcast. So we wanted to create a separate podcast. But Again, we appreciate you listening. Find us wherever you get your podcast or on social media at the State Line Fast Break Pod. This has been another edition of the State Line Fast Break Podcast. Thank you for listening.